Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are coming from in this glorious world. I'd like to know, just from a sign of thumbs up or some reaction, how did all the icebreakers go? Well, everybody had a great time? Awesome. Well, we're so glad for that. You guys are in for a wonderful treat at this point because it gives me great pleasure to introduce Abhijeet Joshi. He happens to be the District 101 Program Quality Director and District Director-elect. He has a wonderful presentation for us today about how to evaluate with empathy, and pay close attention because next week, when you are giving your speeches, you will each be giving the evaluations to your fellow participants. So pay attention, learn from the best, and I'm going to take it away and spotlight. We are going to have the timings at 20, 25, and 30. Do you wish to have the timer spotlighted when the timings come on? Or no, you're okay? You can pin them? Okay.
Yes.
Then please help me welcome Abhijeet Joshi with Evaluate with Empathy.
Few years ago, me and my boss were in the same meeting. In that meeting, my boss was talking a little bit, or I could say he was rambling a lot. And after the meeting, he immediately called me and asked me, give me 1 second. He asked me immediately, how was my feedback? At that moment, I got a little bit scared, and I did not tell him exactly that he was rambling. I went back to my mentor. I told him what had exactly happened. And that time he said, you need to work on your evaluations. Because if you can work on your evaluations, when you give feedback, you will be able to give feedback in a compassionate, candid way. Today, we're just going to deep dive into what compassionate candor is and how to give that feedback. Let's get it started. Here is the agenda. I'm going to give you this slide deck so you don't have to worry about taking notes. We'll start with why. Why do evaluations matter? And then we'll talk about what is a radical candor approach. Then we'll talk about the magic of I statements, followed by the system and structure. Then we'll go into what is an ideal feedback. This was something I did not know because I was good at giving opinions. We'll talk about superlatives and rambling. And then I'll share how to practice. I'll also talk about what we are evaluating. I'll give you 16 categories. And then we'll take some questions if we have time. Let's get it started. My first question to you, Pramod, why do we need to evaluate? Pramod?
We want to give a clear picture about the speech to the speaker and also to motivate the speaker to give more and more speech. The thing is, we want to make the speaker understand about his strength and a little bit about his or her weaknesses.
Very true. Thank you, Pramod. Anyone else? Chandana?
Maybe through evaluation we can understand the the image in your brain to the other person.
We get a chance to know what we are doing well. So thank you, Chandana. Padma, anything from you?
It's a way for the evaluator to communicate to the speaker on what I have grasped from the speech. The speaker may be thinking in one way, but it may have come across to the person receiving the speech in a different way. So the speaker gets to know what was actually received by the audience.
We get a chance to learn what did well and what we could improve on. But there's one more thing I want to tell you. When we do an evaluation, it's a chance for us to learn from the speaker, because sometimes I'm not that good of speaker, but if they are doing something, I can emulate that. So remember, it's a big learning opportunity for us. What things they are doing well, sometimes that can help us to become a better speaker. Always understand the why, because evaluations are very, very helpful. Before we go into a lot of things, I want you to remember these 3 takeaways. Okay, these 3 takeaways are radical candor. I'll explain what radical candor is. And then we'll talk about the magic of I statements and giving a feedback with a why. So these are 3 takeaways. But remember, there are 3 more things which evaluations means. These 3 things are important in evaluations. The first thing is active listening. We have to really listen to what the speaker is saying. And sometimes I see myself that when the speaker is speaking, I get lost in some dreamland. I need to bring back myself so that I can listen to the speaker. Second thing is critical thinking, because the speech is 5 to 7 minutes long. There are so many things happening. We need to pick up those things that stand out. And the third most important thing, whenever we are giving an evaluation, we need a heart. We need a heart. So remember these 3 things whenever you are evaluating: active listening, critical thinking, and heart. And when you are evaluating, remember these 3 things: the radical candor, I statements, and feedback with a why. Let's see what radical candor is. Have anyone heard of radical candor? Anyone? Okay. Radical candor is based upon a Kim Scott's book. She wrote a book about how to give feedback at work. Radical candor is just an XY axis. You have a Y axis. On the top side, you care personally about the person. On the bottom side, you don't care about the person. On one side of X axis, you stay silent. And on the other side, you challenge directly. Now there are these 4 quadrants: 1, 2, 3, 4. Just give it a thought. 1, 2, 3, 4. Which quadrant your evaluation should lie? Meena, which quadrant should evaluation should lie?
Second quadrant, to challenge the speaker and care for them.
Very true. So remember this quadrant. Challenge the speaker as well as being caring for them. So let's go through each and every quadrant. I'm not going to go through quadrant number 4 because I've not seen that very much in Toastmasters. Let's talk about ruinous empathy. A few years ago, I was doing an evaluation. The person was a veteran Toastmaster. He was giving a level 5 speech, reflect on your path. When he was giving the speech, I realized that he was not prepared and his speech was not meeting the objectives, because I think that speech is 10 to 12 minutes and he just spoke for 5 to 7 minutes. But when I gave that evaluation, I stayed silent. I did not tell him anything about these 2 things. That is ruinous empathy. This is the second worst quadrant to be in because you are not creating any value for the speaker. Ruinous empathy. This is the worst quadrant. This is the second worst. The third quadrant, obnoxious aggression. I was in an advanced club, and that day I gave a speech, and there were 15 people giving me feedback what things I was doing wrong. After some time, I was like, no, that's enough. Nothing was going in my head. I was so defensive about it. That is obnoxious aggression. Here, actually, you are telling something about value to the person, to the speaker. But sometimes they can become too defensive to take it. So watch that. And finally, the last one, the radical candor approach. This black box is the radical candor. What does it mean? Here, when we are giving the feedback, we are challenging the speaker, but we are doing in an empathetic way. So let's find out how we can do that. Any questions so far? Anyone? If there are no further questions, I'll go forward. So these are the 4 quadrants. You can see the maximum change is in this quadrant, in the radical candor approach. Here, little change, people become defensive. And here, no change. Remember that. When we are evaluating the speech, if we don't like that person, we keep that aside. We are not worried about that. The only thing when we are evaluating the speech is the content, is the delivery, and how did that speech impact you? Whenever you're listening to the speech arouses some feelings in you. And we need to convey those feelings to the speaker because then they get a good feedback. So remember, when we are evaluating, we are only evaluating 3 things: the delivery, the content, and the impact. Keep other things aside. I was reading this book, The Autobiography of a Yogi. As I was reading that book, there was one statement or one quote that stood out. The quote said, "Observation, not judgment, is the highest form of human intelligence." Observation, not judgment, is the highest form of human intelligence. Whenever we are evaluating, we are sharing our observations. We are only sharing our observations. And when we are observing, we have to use that language. So these 3 statements, I saw, I felt, I heard. I saw, I felt, I heard. These, when we use the statements in this way, we are sharing our observations. And if you look at these 3 statements, they are auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. If we include all these 3 statements, we are connecting with each and every type of audience, as well as we are also connecting with the speaker, because we don't know if the speaker is visual or if he's auditory or he's a kinesthetic. So keep those in mind. There are many I statements, and I want to show you a list of I statements. So these are for basic observations, as I told you. I saw, I felt, I heard. But if there is something that really stood out for you, and you want to use a different language, you can say, I liked, I loved, I enjoyed. So keep that in mind. Something really stands out for you, use that language. If there is something which you did not like, you can say that. Or if you were confused by, like when I was one day I went to Texas, a club in Texas. The evaluator started with the statement that he was confused by. So that helped me understand that, oh, my content is such, or my structure is such that it is not easy for people to understand. In 2020, there was this fellow speaker who gave a tall tales. He had a wonderful speech, but one thing he was doing is he was using way too many props. And I did not like that much because it was disturbing me. So I told him, I disliked the usage of too many props because it was distracting me from the speech. So you can talk about that. If you don't understand something, point that out. And finally, if you want to see something in the speech, you can use that kind of language. Like, I wanted to see something, or I would have liked to hear something, or I would have liked to see something. So you can use that language. So remember, these statements are very, very helpful. They are the observation statements. Keep those in mind. Any questions? Whenever someone is giving a speech, we have to take notes. Initially, when I was taking notes, I used to write so big, like I used to write a speech. And sometimes taking long notes, I was missing what they were saying because I was too engrossed in writing the notes. In my club, the fellow district champion, Renee, she said when she is writing the notes, she only writes in 140 characters. Very small amount of notes so that she can focus more on the speech. So remember that. You're only taking very short notes and going back to listening what the speaker is saying. We can use any kind of system to take notes. And here is my system. I just take a paper. On one side, I write a plus sign. On the other side, I write the dash sign. And if something stands out, I'll write on the plus side. And something the speaker could do to make the speech more effective, I'll write it on the dash side. And if there is something that really stands out, I'll use a star sign. And if something I'm confused by, I'll use a question mark. So this is the system which I use. You can use any kind of system. This system is very helpful for me to take very shorthand notes. One thing I wanted to tell you, when I started evaluation, I dreaded evaluations. I was very afraid of it. I didn't know what structure to use. But later on, I came to know that I can use a certain structure. Today, I'll give you that structure. But one thing I want to tell you more is after the speaker is done, initially, when I started doing evaluations, I used to write my whole evaluation, complete evaluation, and then I used to deliver it. Because of that, my structure was maintained and my summary was to the point. So let's go through what kind of a structure we are going to use. So remember, an evaluation is also like a speech. It has the introduction, body, and conclusion. But we are going to use it in a different way. I want you to look at this chart. When I'm doing an introduction, I'm just doing the introduction for 20 seconds. And I'm only sharing how this speech impacted me. Only 20 seconds in here. Okay. For example, one of my friends, he gave a speech and he was talking about camping. And in that story, they had to make a decision, either to camp or walk or hike 4 hours to the car. He said, since it was very cold, they decided to walk to the car. I told him when he started the speech, if I were you in your shoes, I would have also done the same. I would have hiked back to my car. The reason? Because when it comes to cold, I'm a wimp. So that's the way I connected with him in my introduction. So remember, your introduction is just the connection, the impact the speech had on you. Or if the speech reminds you of something, you can talk about it. But remember, it's only 20 seconds. You want to immediately go into the body where you talk about the two things the speaker did effectively. See the language I'm using. I'm talking about the two things the speaker did effectively. Then I talk about the two things the speaker could do to make their speech more effective. I never talk about improvement, criticism, those kind of words I don't use. And finally, the best thing about the speech. This is the body. Now, when I'm summarizing, I reverse the order for summarizing. I talk about two things the speaker could do to make their speech more effective first. then the things they did effectively, and the best thing about the speech. The reason I do that, because I want to end on a higher note, on a positive note. And my goal is to motivate the speaker. My goal is to motivate the speaker. Okay? Keep this in mind. Any questions regarding structure? Mary, anything from you? Thank you. Now,
Abhijeet, I have,
yes.
this is Ravina, real quick question. I do it a little differently when it's an icebreaker speech because
Yes.
the person is just beginning their journey and I want to focus more on the positives more than anything else. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Whenever it comes icebreaker, sometimes I'll just give them one thing to do to make the speech more effective. And one thing, as Rovina is saying, is you have to meet where the speaker is. If the person is doing second pathway and they're doing the icebreaker, oh, I'm going to give them a lot of feedback. But if it's a first time speaker, then it's very different.
Okay.
Meet the
Great.
speaker at their level. Yeah. So far we went through all these things. Now we'll talk about feedback. And this is something I've learned from the world champion. I didn't know this. Okay, then we'll talk about superlatives and rambling. This is something which my mentor talks about a lot. Then we'll talk about practice and what to evaluate. Questions? Okay, feedback. Whenever I hear the evaluations, they just say, oh, vocal variety was great. Oh, vocal variety was not good. If you look at that statement, it doesn't give any information to the speaker. That is just an opinion. Okay, that is just an opinion. Avoid that. Whenever you are giving feedback, if you are saying your vocal variety was not good, you have to attach a why to it. Attach a why to it. Then I would say your vocal variety. I would never say about vocal variety, but I would talk about I felt the speech did not convey the emotions because the way your tone was, it was just in a narrow band. Because of that, I did not feel the emotions. See, I'm attaching the why to it. Remember, always attach a why. Now, if you want to take it to the next level, attach a why and give that specific example. Remember that specific example because then the speaker knows what they said and how could they make it effective. So remember, what is an ideal feedback? Ideal feedback has a why attached to it and also has that specific example attached to it. And I want to give you one more thing. My friend or my soul sister, Lindy McLean, whenever she gives an evaluation, she also tells you how to do it effectively. She gives a demonstration. So sometimes if you can demonstrate to the speaker how they could do it, that becomes it becomes very valuable for the speaker. So demonstration is another thing you can do. But remember the ideal feedback always has a why attached to it and that specific example. Superlatives. One day my friend Renee was doing an evaluation and I was the GE. As she was doing the evaluation, I noted down how many times she'd used the word amazing, 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 amazing. She had used the word 8 times. My mentor at Solardar says, if someone uses too many superlatives, it shows the laziness of the usage of English language. Because if you say something, oh, your speech was amazing, it was fantastic, it does not give any information to the speaker because we haven't attached the why to it. So remember that. Don't just say, oh, it was amazing. Attach that why to it. I have a very good friend. Dhruva. He's a very good evaluator. He was evaluating my speech at a contest. And as he was going through the evaluation, I was enjoying his evaluation. But there was this one point in that evaluation, it took so much of time. Because of that, he could not summarize the whole evaluation and he came in second. So avoid rambling. Be very specific to the point and move on to the next point. One more thing I started doing in my evaluations is I always let the speaker know what my structure is. I give them the introduction and then I tell them, I'm going to talk about 2 things you did effectively, 2 things you could do to make your speech more effective, and the best thing about the speech. So giving people that structure really helps them to follow us. We all have heard the speech. So no need to regurgitate that speech completely to us. So as an evaluator, I just have to tell them, whatever I felt, I saw, I heard. No need to repeat that speech. Sometimes I see the evaluations, they just tell us the whole speech. And that's not an evaluation. We all have heard the speech. To get better at evaluations, we just have to practice, practice, practice. My friend Rennie was in the finals and we decided, okay, we are going to practice. So we went through the 2020 semifinals. There were 28 speeches. She would give me the evaluation. We would hear the speech. After 5 minutes, she would give me an evaluation and then I would give a critic. So we did that at least 17, 18 times. And because of that, when it came to the finals, the district finals, she was well ahead of all the speakers, all the evaluators. So remember, practice, practice, practice. It takes a long time. I was pretty bad at when I started evaluations, but I decided I'm going to sign up for evaluations every week. So practice is very important. Now we are going to talk about what things to evaluate for. I'm going to give you some categories, 16 categories. This is just a small, this is not the complete list, just a sample. And then questions. As I talked about, vocal variety is emotions. Is the person able to convey the emotions? So remember that if they are able to convey the emotions, then talk about the vocal variety in your speech. Body language. Body language is 55% of the communication. So see, does the body language communicate something to you? Or if they could use their body precisely, what can it communicate you? So you can talk about that in your evaluation. Role play. Role play is very effective when you use 2 different characters in your speech with different voices, because it communicates a lot of things in a very small amount of time and very few words. Very effective. It also creates that differences between the 2 characters. Easy to understand. Audience awareness. We have to know how, does the speaker understand the audience awareness? Sometimes you can point that out in your evaluation. Props. When Dhananjaya used that rose, it was so effective. You can encourage the speaker if you get an idea about a prop. Or you can talk about if their prop was effective or not. Clarity. When the speaker goes through a speech, was it clear? Did you understand the story? You can talk about that. Pauses. Mostly when you see the speakers, they don't pause. Pauses are very effective. And you can encourage the speaker if they're not pausing enough in your evaluation, because that helps us to catch up with what they are saying. I love this technique. This is called as book ending technique. Whatever your first line is, you end with that similar line. When you make that whole circle, it closes that story precisely. So remember the first line and the last line. I had this speaker I was evaluating. I noticed that he was pausing a little bit too much because I immediately realized he was not prepared. So when I was giving the evaluation, I told him that if you can prepare your speech well, or if you can practice well, you will be able to get rid of this unwanted pauses in your speech. So preparation is something you can share in your evaluation. Content. Was the content clear? Remember the transition lines, because transitions are very important. Sometimes we can lose people in the transitions. So you can talk about content in your evaluation. Comfort. Was the speaker comfortable when he was speaking? For example, yesterday in my club, there was this lady, she was giving a speech, and this was her second speech, and she was speaking in front of 25 live people in the room. And the confidence, I was surprised by her confidence. So you can talk about their comfort level when they are speaking. Call to action. Call to action can be very effective. Does the speaker have a very effective call to action? You can talk about that. So these are all the 16 categories. This is not the complete list. I just wanted to share a sample with you. Remember these 3 takeaways. Always use the radical candor. You challenge the speaker directly, but in a compassionate and empathetic way. Remember the I statements. I saw, I felt, I heard. And always give a feedback with a why and a specific example attached to it. Any questions? Susan, can you unspotlight me?
Yes. We do
Yes,
have a
Becky.
question from
Yeah.
Tina.
Tina, go ahead.
Yes. So, for if we have to evaluate any experienced speaker, like the speaker is experienced than me, then I feel overwhelmed that because while the speaker is speaking, I am at the receiving end, that I find only good things in them. So to evaluate in order to make them better is really challenging for me. So how to evaluate in this case?
One thing I've learned is I can always share my feelings, how the speech is landing on me. When you share your feelings, that can be very effective. And second thing is, it doesn't matter how experienced the speaker is. When you have a lot of experience doing the evaluation, you can pick up things more. So just keep on evaluating, and then you will start seeing more and more things. When I started my evaluation, I was not seeing very much things, but then evaluating it for 150 times, now it becomes very easy to catch things. So just practice, you get better at catching things.
Super. Thank you. Tina Smith.
My question is with your slide that had the 4 quadrants,
Mhm.
and you had obnoxious aggression.
Yes.
What did that fall under? You had no change, mistrust, but I didn't get the obnoxious aggression.
Okay. Obnoxious aggression is giving very challenging feedback without caring for the person. So what happened when I was very new to Toastmasters, maybe just 1 year, and I went to an advanced club, and I was not ready for it, and they were giving very direct and challenging feedback, and that was a little bit too much for me, too direct for me to take in and apply that. So that was kind of an example of obnoxious aggression.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Abhijeet? We do have one from Animesh. hand
Yeah.
raised?
Yes, I do. Hi, Abhijeet. So continuing from what Lena asked, this is and because when you're evaluating an experienced speaker, there are so there are things that you may have noted that the speaker must have already taken note of. So is it so is it necessary to give them some feedback that they may have not come across, or just continue with it, just continue with what you have?
Okay, one thing I want to tell you. First of all, we need to change our approach or perspective. Whenever someone is speaking, I don't want to put them at any pedestal. I'm just evaluating them because as soon as I say, like, oh my God, I am evaluating the third place winner of the world championship, I'm making myself small and I'm creating more pressure for myself. Instead, if I have that approach that, oh, I'm just going to help that person, how does that speech lands on me? I just share. Sometimes, if you don't get anything, then tell what things they did effectively. That's enough. But if you just sharing your feelings is also very important because those feelings, you will come to know what is happening in the speech. Like, for example, I have this friend. She's a third place winner of the world championship and she's practicing her new speech. Her mechanics are absolutely perfect. There is nothing I can find in the mechanics. But her story, there is something in the story which doesn't connect with me, with the content. And I share, oh, when you did the story, your tension, you did not create the tension very well. It didn't go up to the crescendo. So that was something I gave her that feedback. So just share your heart and see how the content landed on you. Was it clear for you? Did it stand out? Was it helpful, Animesh and Lena?
Yes, thank you very much, Abhijit. And I understand that this what just to summarize, I shouldn't be actually setting some sort of benchmark of sorts, right?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very
Yes.
much.
We are
Observe
running
your
shy on, I'm sorry, running shy on time. We can handle one more question if we can. We have Mayuri, you had your hand up.
Oh, yes. Abhijit, this was an excellent presentation. However, I have one question regarding your slides. So when you were talking about the body, right, we can give an introduction which caused an impact to the evaluator. And then for the body content, you mentioned two things which went well and two things which could be improved. But you also mentioned not to use the word to improve or to criticize. So why is that? If there are two things which the speaker has got to improve, then how do you go about without telling that there are points
Oh,
for
yeah.
improvement?
So instead of saying, oh, you need to improve on this, I said, here are the things you could do to make your speech more effective.
Okay.
So see the language I'm using. The more effective is very easy for the heart. You need to improve on this. It's like a judgment, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Raghu, you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Abhijit. Wonderful presentation as always. But I have one question. There are speakers that you yourself mentioned while you started your speech who come unprepared, have no clue about speech objectives, and then they talk about it. What is the best way to give feedback to them?
That's a hard question. But one thing I've learned is like I've learned this from Ravi. Okay. Me and my fellow Toastmaster. One thing he has told me is there is something positive in that speech. There is something that you can talk about. Find that something. Because everyone, whenever they are speaking, there is something which will stand out. We can talk about that, but then go into directly challenging that person in a very empathetic way. Hey, this is a very good story, but if you had worked on it, that message would have landed on me very precisely. That would have been very effective. So I encourage you to practice this speech, prepare it, and work on your content. That will make it more effective.
Thank you,
Thank
Abhijeet.
you so
Uses very softer language, but very impactful. Give it to them. Share all the information.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abhijeet, for taking the time for that. I was about to share my screen to give you your certificate, and it looks like it wants me to share my screen here, not my file. So I will have to send you the certificate that I have for you. My humblest apologies. I'm unable to share it online here at the moment. But maybe second look. Can we do that, Abhijeet Joshi? For anybody can speak ABC Speechcraft. Thank you so very much. We do appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today. It is now time for us to break back to the breakout rooms. There are 3 things that you need to do today, one of which is to talk about next week's schedule, where the Speechcrafters will be giving their speech with a purpose. They will also be looking at the midway feedback within the Speechcraft so they can have their survey done and see if they've found some progression. They'll do that once again at the end. And then you will be doing another impromptu session with them. At the close of that session, you may all leave the room, leave the meeting, and we see you all next week. But before you go, I did want to just mention, last week when I introduced all of my coordinators, I realized I humbly forgot to introduce myself. Now, it seems a little silly at this length of time after I have communicated with many of you over the time, but it's appropriate for me to introduce myself because I was told never to talk to strangers, and here I am at Toastmasters. I've been in Toastmasters since 1995. Yes, longer than some of you have been on this earth. I understand that, but I love it. I joined after a Speechcraft session, and I have been in it ever since. I belong in multiple clubs, in multiple divisions, and I absolutely love serving one another within Toastmasters. I am just so happy to be with you on this journey. And I am now going to open up the breakout rooms for you to go meet with your coordinators once again. And I'll bid you all a fair good night. Stop the recording.